Hello, everybody. Thanks again for joining me this evening. This evening, I'm going to be talking about the shadow self. The shadow self, I'm going to be talking about the shadow self in terms of what it is, where it comes from, where the theory comes from, a guy called Carl Jung. I'm going to be talking about what happens if we deny our shadow self, if we tend to push it away, if we pretend, we keep pretending it's not there. I'm also going to talk about the benefits of integrating our shadow self. And I'm going to be talking about our shadow self as well from the context of, I know a lot of people that watch my channel, they talk about things like, they ask a lot of questions around narcissism and things like that. So I'm going to be looking at the shadow self in terms of narcissism. In other words, what happens when we really don't acknowledge those parts of us and we don't integrate those parts. So there's a lot to cover. I'm not sure I'm going to get everything covered. There's when it comes to the shadow self. I mean, sometimes when you're training, you're talking a whole module worth. To do this in the next hour, I'm going to really do this in a nutshell. But the concept of the shadow self, it comes from a psychoanalyst called Carl Jung. He referred to the shadow as it's that part of us, those unconscious parts of us that drive a lot of our behaviors, a lot of our beliefs, and so on. They're the parts of us that we're not aware of. They're the parts of us that are unacceptable, if you will. They're the parts of us that are unacceptable to us. They're also unacceptable to other people. So they tend to get pushed away. The things that we don't like. Society doesn't like them. We don't like them either. They maybe go against our moral compass or whatever. But they are unconscious parts of us that are repressed. Okay? Their qualities, their desires, their beliefs, their traits that we really aren't happy with, that we tend to ignore, but they do still drive a lot of what we do. And I'm going to go a little bit more in depth into that. But Jung recognized that understanding the shadow self can be very beneficial because we can tap into resources we didn't know perhaps we had. We can be a lot more creative. We can be a lot more courageous when we're aware of the things that we are capable of. For instance, we don't like lying, but we know that we're capable of lying. When we're aware of those things, that gives us a choice. I'm a big believer in therapy. I'm a big believer in self-awareness. Self-awareness will always give us a choice because a lot of the time we do things automatically, unconsciously, and afterwards we say things like, oh, you see me, I always do that. With awareness, we can't say that any longer because the next time we're in a situation and we're going to do what we always do, we have a choice. We can continue doing what we always do. Who knows? It could well be the best course of action, or we could choose something different. Okay. So we know in our shadow self, we be aware that we're capable of rage, we're capable of hatred, we're capable of lying, we're capable of stealing, but we choose not to. Maybe these things go against our moral compass. Maybe we've been in environments, situations, relationships where other people have behaved like that, and they're the things that we don't like. We don't do those things either. But there may be other things in our shadow self. There may be other things that could be of great benefit to us, such as the willingness to try something new, the willingness to perhaps take a risk, a calculated, a safe kind of risk, to try to succeed, to compete maybe a little bit harder. So, to give you an idea of the shadow self, this is where graphics would be easier. But if you imagine the person, the whole, okay, that whole person, there's bits in them as they move through life. They learn things like, this is not my world. I'm just part of it. So that part goes into the shadow and they learn new. I have to learn to share, to take part. They also learn things like, I I don't get just because I'm special. They learn. So that bit goes into the shadow. They learn things like, if I want it, I have to work for it. And that might require sacrifice. They learn negotiation. They learn resilience to things like disappointment. So different aspects over time go into the shadow self. But then as we get older, we might be in environments, we might be in situations where we meet people who will lead us to believe that things like the word no is a selfish word. So that goes into the shadow. And the new thing we've learned is I always have to say yes. If I pay attention to my own needs, if I say no, if I stand up for myself, that means I'm being bad, I'm being the villain. So it's not just like bad things or difficult things or things we have to learn anyway. It's not that they go into the shadow self, other things go in as well. And in long term situations, even as adults, you think of being in a narcissistic relationship where you're continually told having boundaries is bad or you must meet someone else's needs and all of that sort of thing. They all go into the shadow as well. And we start to lose confidence, we start to lose self esteem. These things are going into our shadow self. So, being able to recognize our shadow self and integrate it, we can get these things back. We can tap into them, we can utilize them, we can negotiate whether it's the best course of action or not. So, acknowledging and exploring even our shadow self can get us a more complete understanding of ourselves, and not just the relationship with ourselves, but the relationship with the people around us. Because not everything is like all or nothing. It's not everything's good or bad. You know, we sometimes we have this belief good people are good and bad people are bad. When the truth is, we're all capable of good and bad. Good people, good people are capable of doing things that are inappropriate, that are hurtful. Bad people are capable of acts of incredible tenderness, kindness, and generosity. So we all have the capacity for both. And when we integrate our shadow self, we're recognizing that. Remember, they're the parts of us that are unacceptable. Even though some of those things might be quite good and they were kind of conditioned out of us, when we're aware of it, we have a choice. When we have a choice, we're not acting unconsciously and they're not automatic. So let's begin. What I'm going to do tonight as well, as I said, working on our shadow self can take a lot of time, and it is easier if you do it with a good therapist, someone who's trained in psychoanalytical theory, someone who knows what they're talking about. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some questions that might maybe start you on your journey. Just questions to think about. Some of the things that come up in us, to pay attention to maybe where things came from and what we can maybe do differently. Okay. So when we're talking about integrating our shadow self, remember the parts of us that we don't like, parts of us that are unacceptable. Let's look at this in the terms of narcissism. Okay. In other words, this is an extreme case, but I'm trying to show you something. When we don't integrate, whenever we are in denial, okay? So now, if you think of the construct of narcissism, they believe they are flawless, they are perfect, they never do anything wrong. Anything that is flawed or wrong or bad or whatever it is, that gets rejected, okay? It's like they filter the world a certain way. They're right, everyone else is wrong. So when we don't when we're not aware of our shadow self, when we don't integrate it, what often happens is, and a lot of people may have experienced this, what happens is people start to project the things they're not happy with about themselves. It's like they dump them onto other people. They blame other people. Now, there is a saying, again, I think it comes from Jung. The things we don't like in other people are often the things we see reflected in ourselves. So you get people who are maybe greedy, selfish, they constantly lie, but they accuse other people of doing that. It's other people who are selfish. It's other people who are lying to them. It's other people who are treating them badly. So the parts of them that they don't like just get dumped onto other people. No acknowledgement that they do that themselves. And if you're in a situation or a relationship with people who continually project, it leads to an awful lot of misunderstandings, a lot of arguments, a lot of conflict, and a lot of strained relationships. Relationships, situations, environments, they tend to end when there's a lot of projection. People often get sick, sore, and tired of being blamed for things the other person's doing. The other thing that happens whenever we don't integrate our shadow self is there are repeated patterns of sabotage, but also self sabotage. Now, I've said this many times and in many videos I've done, that narcissism, I think, by its very nature, is destructive. It tends to destroy everything. It destroys people. It destroys workplaces. It destroys movements, communities, groups, and it tends to destroy it from the inside. When it can no longer destroy it from the inside, it tends to try to destroy it from the outside, which is why anybody listening tonight has ever been in a narcissistic relationship. Once the relationship ended, the narcissism didn't end. It continued. There was a lot of character assassination and so on. So what you get is the projection. In other words, victims get blamed for what they do, but it's a repeated pattern because they don't learn. Because they haven't learned from their shadow self, because they haven't taken on board the impact of their own behavior. So it's not just sabotaging other people, it's actually self-sabotaging. They always end up hurting themselves eventually. There can be destructive behaviors, recurrent unhealthy relationship dynamics. Sometimes people can go from one kind of relationship to the other, and there's a common thread throughout them all because they haven't integrated that part of themselves that maybe they've learned, or maybe they believe that they have to have someone to rescue, someone to fix, someone to help, someone to try and bring out the best of. I'm okay if you're okay. So they don't recognize those things. In narcissistic context, they don't learn anything. They just meet someone new and then start all over again. They do the same thing again, trying to grind someone down to become the version of them that they prefer, someone who's ownable, someone who's controllable. Pardon me. It can also lead to, whenever we don't integrate our shadow self, there's like a cognitive dissonance. Now, you think in terms of, say, people-pleasing behaviors. Now, there's nothing wrong with being nice to people. God knows the world needs more nice people. There's nothing wrong with being nice to people. But when it comes to people-pleasing, it's like we put other people's needs in front of our own. Everybody else is much more important. We don't want to be a burden on others. We don't want to hurt. We don't want to offend. So there is that belief that good people do good things. For instance, saying no is a bad word. So good people do good things. We don't say no. But then there's the other part that recognizes every time I say yes, look what this costs me. This is more than this is more than I'm able to cope with. I keep on giving, and yet I'm getting nothing back. And yet they keep doing the same things. They keep on saying yes. They keep on helping. They keep on giving second chances and so on. So there's a dissonance there. And whenever we have those two conflicting thoughts, those two conflicting beliefs at once, it can bring up a lot of things. It can bring up anxiety. It can bring up depression. It can bring up low self-confidence, low self-esteem. People can feel a sense of emptiness because the more they do to help other people, depending on the people they're with, by the way, they might be getting nothing back. So that leads to, as I say, that kind of emptiness, a dissatisfaction. But there's also the inner conflict. Because as I said, without knowing why we keep on saying yes, the person keeps on doing it. And afterwards they're saying, why do I keep doing this? Remember, with the integration and with the awareness, it gives us a choice. It can also lead to unresolved issues, psychological issues. There's a lot of repressed emotions. There's maybe traumas, unresolved conflicts. Now, an example I might think of could be if you imagine being at school, you're very, very young, and the teacher blames you for something, and maybe you didn't do it, but the teacher decides to blame you. They blame you, and they're giving you a hard time in front of the whole class. Now, maybe you were about 10 years of age. That might have felt humiliating. You might have felt terrified. It could have been any number of things because it's going to get into a lot of trouble. And that unresolved conflict is in there. Remember, I said before about updating our memories. Every time we're speaking to an authority figure, it might feel as if we're right back there. We might feel as if we're that 10-year-old in front of the teacher again. The authority figure raises their voice, whatever it is, and we start to shut down. But we're not sure why. because again, we're not aware of that part of us. Those things that we might remember it, but we kind of suppress the emotions, the feelings, the unresolved stuff around that. In terms of, again, narcissism, to show you the extreme example, whenever we refuse and deny our shadow self, when we deny those aspects, it can result in like emotional stagnation. It can result in increased anxiety, depression, and a sense of unease. Now, it's the thing about narcissism that people say about them being very controlling. They are very controlling. And I believe one of the reasons for that is, and this is common with all of us, when we feel we can't control something, we will try to control something else. So a narcissistic person might not necessarily feel they have control over, again, a lot of that suppressed stuff, a lot of the stuff they went through, their own traumas, their own difficulties, their own difficult situations. And by not acknowledging that, what they're trying to do is they try to control everybody else around them. They're trying to control their environment, what people think, what people feel, what people do. It gives them a sense of control because of that anxiety and that sense of unease, and even the emotional stagnation, as I said. It can also lead to like a stifled growth. It also stifles our potential, because somewhere in our shadow self, we might have creativity, we might have spontaneity, or we might have a discipline, a self-discipline. We could have a lot of different things going on in there. I am joking tonight. I think it's the hay fever. Sorry. You see, I'm looking very cool tonight. I'm in a t-shirt. That's how hot it is here. But integrating those parts of it is crucial, if you will, for our personal development. By denying, and we limit our potential. By acknowledging and accepting even those parts of us that are unacceptable, we can tap into untapped energy. We can tap into our creativity, personal strengths, our courage, as I said, our willingness to take a risk, to try new things, our self-expression, self-discovery, our assertiveness. When we're aware of them, and again, it gives us a choice, we can learn the difference between aggression and assertiveness. We assert ourselves. Maybe someone told us we were being aggressive, we were being rude, we were being horrible. So that gets suppressed and we stop being assertive. But when we learn about that and we realize our reluctance to be assertive, then what happens is, again, we can draw on that, and that will give us a choice. We may be accused of being aggressive, but we're still able to hold our ground. We're still able to assert ourselves, to be clear and to be concise and to be confident. We can be creative when it comes to problem solving. It's an expression. It's been around a long time. It's, people say thinking outside of the box. Sometimes it's hard to think outside the box if you don't know you're in a box in the first place. Because whenever we're faced with difficult situations, we will make decisions based on different things: what we think, what we feel, what we believe, the options we have, the choices we have. None of these are necessarily good or bad. They are what they are. But we can be a bit more creative. We can take what we're doing really well in this area and bring it into this area. We can watch other people. We can learn from them. We can envy them, but in a healthy way, in an inspiring way. Again, what we do is we lose the all or nothing thinking. For instance, envy is bad. Well, envy is only bad when it's the green-eyed monster. Other times it can be quite inspiring, as I say. When it comes to our traumas as well, sometimes what happens with our traumas is, and it's like a survival mechanism. It can lead to a fragmentation of our psyche, if you will. In other words, what we do is we start to compartmentalize. We put things in different boxes, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because it can help us. But if we're not paying attention, what sometimes happens is, when we compartmentalize things, we don't notice how those things leak into other areas of our lives, other areas of our relationships. We don't always recognize that the way I behaved in this situation, which was very painful and difficult, is the same as how I'm behaving in this situation, which is a different situation. It just maybe feels the same, but I'm behaving the same way. We don't recognize how it leaks into other areas. Tapping into our shadow self, exploring it, learning where things come from. Um, we understand, we recognize patterns, is what I'm trying to say. We can recognize patterns, underlying themes, recurring themes. And again, that gives us a choice. We pay attention to our fears, why I'm afraid, why it's difficult. And it's not that you shouldn't be. But again, that can inform us rather than make the decision for us. I use the term updating our memory. I used it a moment ago. I've used it quite a few times. When we're integrating our shadow self and we become aware of how we react in certain situations. For example, the 10-year-old in front of the teacher. When we update our memory, we can still feel nervous, we can still feel anxious, but we draw on those other parts. And we've recognized how things have leaked into other areas. We behave the same way with the boss in work or with the bully or with whoever they are. We behave with them the same way. We no longer do that. We can start to try different things. We don't necessarily have to deal with ourselves. We can learn the confidence to reach out and to get support from someone else, someone who can help us. Again, it could be another manager if it's at work. It could be your friends, your family. It could be, I don't know, anybody. We can get advice. It could be a therapist. It could be someone who works specifically in advice in that area. We become more informed. What also happens is we lose the all or nothing thinking. I'll give you an example of all or nothing thinking. Imagine if you had a friend, and they're a close friend, and two of you hang out, and you laugh at each other's jokes, and you tell each other stories, and you do fun things together. But then one day, that friend says something or does something you find out about maybe, and it's something you don't like. All of a sudden, they stop being a good person, and you don't want to talk to them again. When we're aware of why that is, it doesn't necessarily have to be a black or white thing. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. It doesn't have to be left or right or whatever. It just becomes, not up or down or whatever. It just becomes, like I said, good people can do bad things and bad people can do good things. We don't like what they did. We don't like what they said. It doesn't necessarily mean we don't like them as a person. And it doesn't mean we can't navigate that. We can't get through that. We can't get around that. We can't come to some kind of consensus. We also learn that when we're arguing or someone is disagreeing with us or arguing with us, even if they can be very vitriolic, we can learn how to handle that with a bit more confidence. But even if they're telling us things we don't want to hear, we can pay attention to them. So I often say, whenever you're arguing with someone, whenever someone's having a go at you, it doesn't matter what they're doing or how they're doing it. Sometimes if you listen to them, you just might pick up something you didn't know 5 minutes ago. They might, even if they're incredibly poor at how they communicate it, you might pick up something new. They might have a perspective you don't have. If it's recurring and ongoing, and they just have a go at you for the sake of it, then we learn something else. We learn how to be a bit more assertive with them. Now, when I said about integrating our shadow self, there are things, as I said, things that we don't like, things we're not comfortable with, things we would perhaps rather not know. And I'm going to give you a personal example of things we don't want to know. I was talking to my therapist one time, many years ago. I was talking to my therapist. And I was telling her things that had happened to me about this one person in particular, the way they behaved. They would always rub me up the wrong way. They would always really get on my nerves. They would always do what they could to try and provoke something. So I'm telling her this story, but I'm telling it from the perspective of a victim. I'm telling her, I'm being treated very badly. But then the story shifts, and I'm telling her about what I did to sort it out, what I did to deal with it. I am now telling the story from the position of the hero. And she's listening to me quite intently. As I finish my story, she just looked at me and she says, "That was quite vindictive, wasn't it?" Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but I'm a wonderful fella. I'm not vindictive at all. I'm amazing. That's not a word I wanted to hear, because I don't see myself as vindictive. What I saw myself doing was putting a stop to something that was really bugging me. But when she told me that was really vindictive, she was right. I was. And I said earlier on about the cognitive dissonance. That doesn't sit well with me, because even when I reflected on that, I felt no satisfaction. Actually, I felt guilt. I should never have said what I said. I did what I did to try and shut it down, to put them back in their box. I thought I'd done the right thing, but I hadn't, because I didn't feel good about it. And as I'm talking to my therapist, and she points out that behavior was quite vindictive, that's not what I wanted to hear, but it's what I needed to hear. Now that I'm a bit more, and we explored it a bit more, where that comes from and stuff like that, as you do in therapy. But now that I'm aware that I can be a vindictive person at times, vindictive's not a nice word, is it? It's often associated with narcissism. Now that I'm aware, I can rein that in. That's what I mean about giving us a choice. Dealing with it very differently. We know what we're capable of. We learn we can disagree without being overly disagreeable. We can be assertive without being aggressive. We learn different things. We can draw on different approaches. We can learn from other people. And the parts of us that we're not acceptable with, the parts of us we really don't like, we know that go against maybe our character or whatever, we keep them in check. Because, again, if I were to be vindictive again, I would be doing it with choice. And I know I'm not going to feel good about it afterwards. I know the other person's not going to feel good about it either. I know that nothing's going to be fixed. So these are the important things, I suppose, about integrating our shadow self. Not everything has to be polarized. Not everything has to be all or nothing. Not everything has to be, it can bring up an anxiety, but not everything has to bring up a fear. I often think a lot of the time it's a fear of the fear. It's not a fear of the thing itself when it comes to our anxieties and our stresses. It's a fear of the feeling, not necessarily the thing itself. So when it comes to integrating our shadow self, it does take a lot of self-reflection. It takes a lot of exploration. This is where I think it's best maybe done in therapy. This is just a pointer to see if you'd find it helpful. It takes a lot of self-acceptance, because we have to, I often say accepting something doesn't mean you're okay with it. Self-acceptance. Another psychologist, Carl Rogers, I love what he said about acceptance. When I accept myself just the way I am now free to begin to change. If we don't accept those things, we will continually deny them. We will continually suppress them. We will continually kick against them, and we will continually dump them onto other people. And we will continually have this kind of dissonance grinding inside, because it's not maybe who or what we are. The things are holding us back. So self-reflection, we engage in a bit of introspection, examining our own thoughts, our own feelings, our own motivations, our own behaviors, being honest with ourselves and identifying different patterns. So I'd say a lot of it is unconscious. So we identify the different patterns running throughout a lot of our interactions. When we delve deeper into those aspects, again with the therapists, we look at what purpose they might serve, because they may have served a purpose at some point. They may have got us through a difficult time. They may have got us out of a difficult situation. Sometimes they're, if you will, they're a survival tactic. They're a trauma response. They could be a lot of different things. So we understand the purpose they served at one point, but also recognize they're not necessarily serving us maybe in different situations. It also takes a lot of self-compassion and not overly judging ourselves, trying to be non-judgmental with ourselves. We're human beings. We're capable of good. We're also capable of bad. And this is, if you will, this is just part of being a human. So we recognize those things and we make a choice. We can choose to be good. We can choose to be bad. We can choose to act in a certain way. We can choose to act in another way. Again, go back to something like people pleasing. No is not necessarily a bad word. Sometimes it's a complete sentence, and sometimes it can be the best word you can use, because we're not always helping people by saying yes to them all the time. Sometimes we might actually be keeping them dependent. We avoid labeling things as good or bad, right or wrong. And this is when we're doing our own work, not just with other people. When we're doing our own work, we recognize it is what it is. It came from somewhere. It served a purpose, not necessarily serving anything in the here and now. So, I'm going to ask some questions now. These are questions you might want to take a note of them. Other than that, you can just replay this part and write them down. But some questions to think about when it comes to looking at your shadow self. The first question is to ask yourself, what parts of me, what aspects of me do I find difficult? What parts of me do I find difficult to accept, to acknowledge? Again, that's what I mean about the self-reflection. So what parts of me do I feel uncomfortable with? Also, what parts of me do other people feel uncomfortable with? Now, it's not to say they're right or wrong, because there could be something going on that maybe we do need to change for the better or whatever. But we pay attention to why they're uncomfortable, because they could be uncomfortable just because maybe we do have healthy boundaries, but they could be uncomfortable because we just keep avoiding things. They could, whatever it is. We pay attention to the things that we find difficult and the things other people feel difficult. See if we can find some kind of correlations there. Correlation, nearly said that. How do the rejected parts, the parts of you that you don't like, how do they manifest themselves? How do they manifest in your thoughts, your thinking habits? For example, do I catastrophize? Do I mind read? Do I jump to conclusions based on how I feel? Do I predict the future? Do I label things good, bad, right, wrong? How do they manifest in your emotions? For example, what sort of things bring you excitement? What sort of things cause anxiety? What sort of things cause shame, difficulties, things like that? So how do they manifest themselves, even in your behaviors? Somebody raises their voice. Do you back down? Do you look at your feet? I don't know, someone bats their eyelids at you. Do you rush over to them? Someone presents in some kind of difficulty. Are you the first person to offer assistance? Again, it's not about being right or wrong, good or bad. It's about recognizing these things. So how do these things manifest in your behavior? What fears or insecurities come up for you that you associate with your shadow self? For instance, there could be the fear of making mistakes. People talk about perfectionism. I like things to be perfect. Well, that doesn't exist. It's not real. So it's not necessarily about perfectionism. It's more the fear of making a mistake. It's the fear of being seen to have made a mistake. It's the fear of being ridiculed, laughed at, whatever. It could be the fear of succeeding, because with success comes new expectations. So a lot of people fear, what if I fail at success? What if I can't maintain this? There's new expectations on me. There's now new responsibilities. Sometimes it's a bit of both, the fear of mistakes and the fear of success. So what we do is we tend to stay stuck in the middle. It's almost like we try to stay hidden in plain sight. We don't want to draw attention to ourselves either way. It could come up, say, the fear of rejection, which is why we keep saying yes, or why we keep giving in, which is why we keep complying. In what situations or relationships do you notice the patterns occurring? Do you notice perhaps you projecting things onto other people, blaming others for maybe the things you have done wrong, or the way you're reacting in this situation is because of what happened in this situation? The things that we don't like about ourselves, taking responsibility. Again, with narcissism, that generally doesn't happen. It can be painful for us to take responsibility. Regardless of what happened here, we are still responsible for what we are doing here. Again, how do I engage with other people? Like I said a moment ago, do I back down whenever I'm challenged? Do I give in if somebody raises their voice? What hidden desires, suppressed emotions might be hidden in your shadow self? For instance, anger. Many of us are taught anger is a bad thing, when actually it's not. It's a healthy thing to feel. It's a normal thing to feel. What isn't so good is things like rage, tantrums, aggression. That's not so good. Anger's not necessarily a bad thing. Anger's our way of telling ourselves this is unfair. This is not good enough. Something has to change here. That anger could be hidden in our shadow self. We're afraid to feel or express anger. Maybe we've never been taught. Maybe we've never been shown. Maybe we've never seen it expressed in a healthy way. There could be the fear of ambition. I know I'm capable of more. I could be doing better than this. I'm worth more than this. I'm smarter than this. I work harder than this. But to acknowledge that, there could be the fear of being accused of being arrogant. We don't want to be arrogant. Arrogant, again, that's a bad word. When actually it's not. Being ambitious, that's just being confident. That's being prepared to try. So again, we're misunderstanding the terms. And again, it could be the fear of the new responsibility. I'm ambitious, but I want it without the consequences. I want it without the sacrifice. I want it without the new responsibility. So what sort of things might be hiding in your shadow self? Things that, as I said, you can draw on. How does your shadow self influence your self-esteem and your self-confidence? Again, do you project yourself onto others? Now, how many times have you had a conversation with someone and as they're talking to you, they actually tell you what you're thinking? They're telling you what you're feeling. So, for instance, they're telling you about something they've done, and they will say something like, you probably think I'm mad. Well, truly, you're probably not. You're probably thinking, when's lunch? Is there any coffee left? You could be thinking anything. That's their stuff. Again, their self-esteem, their self-image, and they're projecting it onto other people. You probably see me as this. You probably think that I'm that. You probably think I'm mad. Whatever it is. So, how does what is in your shadow self influence your self-esteem, your self-worth, your self-image, your self-confidence? Remember, when we put the word self in front of something, more often than not, it's not what I think of me. It's what I think others think of me. It's why it often gets dumped onto other people. Are there any experiences, whether in childhood, whether in adulthood, that have contributed to the formation of your shadow? Again, you think of growing up, take that look off your face. Don't you dare answer me back. So, with good intentions or bad, by the way, sometimes we learn not to answer back to authority figures. Or it goes the other way. No one's in charge of me. No one tells me what to do. Even in our adult relationships, what sort of experiences have come up? The time, again, if you've been in a toxic narcissistic relationship, the time you expressed a need, you were just told no. They looked at you blankly. What, nothing to do with me. The time you said no, you were told you were selfish, you were uncaring. The time you did anything at all that was in your own best interest, it was sabotage somehow to stop you. And these things, as I say, they go into our shadow. So we're afraid to ask because we know we'll just be told no. We're afraid to stand up for ourselves because they'll probably go ahead and do whatever it is they were planning to do anyway, whether with or without our permission. We stand up for ourselves. I'm trying to think of how to formulate. We do stand up for ourselves, but maybe it comes out as an insane kind of rant. We're kind of shouting and we're screaming. Because no matter how many times we tried to talk rationally before, it just gets thrown back in our face. So we think the only way to be heard is to shout. Maybe that's what they do. So what experiences, whether in childhood or in adulthood, have informed your shadow, have formed the formation of your shadow? What is in there that was taken. Remember the little parts of us that gets lost and put in there, and the other things we learn. Okay, what can you bring out of that back into your whole character, if you will? How do the disowned aspects of yourself, sorry, I'll read this again. How do the disowned aspects of myself impact my relationships and interactions with others? Okay, the parts of me that I don't like, how do they inform how I interact with others? No's a bad word, for instance. No's a bad word. Trying to find a way of saying no without using the word no. Instead of saying no, we might make up a load of excuses. I can't, the neighbor's cat's not well, my leg just fell off, the milkman has a sore foot, whatever. We make up excuses rather than just say no. We fear saying no, we fear disappointing, we fear hurting, we fear being rejected, so we try to find a way of not doing it without actually saying the word no. It can also lead to things like delayed conversations, avoidance, the fear of, as I say, the fear of the feeling. We don't like how it would feel, so that's what we're trying to avoid. The conversation we need to have, maybe one we have to have. It could be one in our best interest. It could even be one in the other person's best interest. But we wouldn't like how it would feel, so we keep on delaying it. It can lead to obstinance as well. The fear of commitment. We want to be friends, but we find it hard to trust. There could be the fear of offending. There's a lot of different things going on. How do those disowned parts, the parts of you don't like, how do they influence your relationships and so on? What positive qualities or strengths might be in your shadow self? Again, there could be assertiveness, there could be courage, there could be determination, there could be ambition, there could be creativity, there could be love, there could be compassion, there could be a lot of things in there that get suppressed. We hide them, they get suppressed away. We don't want to show them. We might look weak. We've been led to believe that something like kindness is weak. No, it's not. We tend to get learned that we tend to get taught if we were to express how we feel, that's a sign of weakness. No, it isn't. So what positive things are in there that you could draw on whenever you need to? We can learn, as I say, we can learn to disagree without being overly disagreeable. We can we learn to discern. We learn to recognize things. We can discern good, bad, right, wrong. We can also discern that sometimes it's not, as I say, not all or nothing. There's a whole spectrum. How can I channel the energy? Here's the last question. How do I channel the energy from my shadow self? You can tell this is getting late at night. I need to start this again. How can I challenge the energy and potential of my shadow self in a constructive and healthy way? We learn the things that have been suppressed, the good stuff. We also learn the things that we're not happy with. We know what we're capable of. We're capable of being aggressive. And I think of the example I gave. I've learned that I can be vindictive, as we all can, but I didn't want to hear that. I choose not to. Instead, I choose to be assertive. Hurting someone for hurting me does not fix anything. I actually end up feeling worse. So I know what I'm capable of. And I use that in the sense that I will withhold that. I will hold on to that. I know I can do it, but I'm not going to. Instead, I'm choosing to, as I say, be assertive. I can be very creative, very resourceful. You can learn that. I'm creative, I'm resourceful. I can make the most of the things I have. What I don't have, I will try to compensate for. I will try to learn. Because I don't know something doesn't make me stupid. It just means I don't have the information or the experience. I'll just go and learn it. I will learn from someone else. I will get advice. I will get guidance. There is so much energy and potential within our shadow self, both good and bad. We draw them and we discern the difference. When is it appropriate to be angry? How to be angry? To be assertive? to be kind, compassionate, forgiving. We learn these things whenever we draw on things from our shadow self. Now, that is our shadow self in a nutshell. There is a lot more to it than that, and I've kind of whizzed through it. This has been almost like a Reader's Digest version of the shadow self. What happens when we don't integrate it? We keep on doing the same repeated patterns of behavior, and we're not sure why. What happens when we do? We can become, if you will, a bit more whole. We can become a bit more confident. We are aware of our strengths, our resources. So I hope there's been something useful in this for you tonight. As always, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through the questions, see if I can pick up a few questions. Anything that people ask. Hello, everybody. The ones at the beginning are always hello. So hello, everybody. Do you mean that there is a narcissist and unconscious of me? Right. Every single one of us has narcissism. Narcissism is, if you will, it's our self-interest. Narcissism is the part of you that wants a better life, that wants happiness, that wants success. The narcissism that's in all of us, believe it or not, even sometimes it's our survival instinct. But if you think of it as our own self-best interest, that's healthy narcissism. What we refer to as a narcissist is someone that takes that to the extreme. Okay? They are the only person in the world that matters. A healthy level of narcissism is the ability to pay attention to ourselves, our own needs, our own wants, our own desires, but also our own flaws, our own weaknesses, areas that we need to develop. But we're able to do that and pay attention to other people as well. Because what I want, what I need might have an impact on other people. It might cost them, it might benefit them. What we call a narcissist doesn't do that. That's the lack of empathy, the lack of regard for other people. They either don't get it or they don't care. It's all about themselves. The other thing about the narcissist, if you will, the term the narcissist, is that inability, as I say, to recognize their shadow self. They are not. Could you imagine? Imagine I'm deeply ingrained narcissism, and I'm sitting with my therapist, and I'm telling her the same story, and she says to me, "That was a bit vindictive." If I had very strong narcissistic traits, the last thing I would do would be to say, "Yeah, I guess it was," and feel bad about it. What I would be saying would be, "Yeah, but look what they did. I had to do that. You know, if I hadn't done that, you know." Do you see what I mean? There would have been a lack of responsibility, a lack of ownership, and a lack of learning, a complete rejection that I had done anything inappropriate. That's the difference. So yes, we all do have narcissism, but it's healthy, it's normal. Again, if you think of a personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, the key term is disorder. The impact it has on their day-to-day functioning, the impact it has on their relationships with themselves as well as with other people. So having a level of narcissism isn't necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't make you a narcissist. Okay. Self-regulation. Yeah. Whenever we learn about our shadow self, we can regulate those things. We can regulate those things that we're uncomfortable with. We can regulate our anxieties, our different the traumas that have caused different things. Again, we look at recurring themes and patterns, and that gives us choice. Self-awareness will always give us a choice. Continue doing what you're doing. Say in some cases it might be the best course of action, who knows? However, it gives you a choice. You can choose something different. Okay. You like the term shadow self. When I think of the term shadow self, for some reason, I'm a sci-fi nerd. When I think of the shadow self, I often think of Star Wars, you know, come over to the dark side, you know. But it's not that at all. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It does make a lot of sense when we recognize there's things about ourselves maybe we don't know, we don't realize. But there are things that we're uncomfortable with as well, things that we need to address, because if we don't, we often keep on doing the same things. Codependency can all look a lot like enabling narcissistic behavior, balance and favor. It can look a lot like enabling it. Codependency, trauma bonding, all those different kind of things. It can be enabling a particular behavior. If we have learned at some point not to answer back, not to stand up for ourselves, to put other people's needs in front of our own, then a lot of time we are actually enabling, because the other person doesn't learn any consequences. Sometimes they don't have to be narcissistic. They don't have to be a bad person. They don't have to be whatever. They don't know they're hurting us because we haven't told them. They don't know they're crossing boundaries. They don't know what they're doing is uncomfortable because we haven't told them. And it could be somewhere in our shadow self, the fear of telling them in case they react badly. Okay. Interesting, the whole shame for having needs as a child. Yeah, having any kind of needs as if there's something wrong with us. Truth is, every single one of us have needs. We have basic needs. We at our very least, we need to know where we're sleeping tonight. We need to know where our next meal's coming from. We have a need for some kind of acknowledgement. Of course we do. Imposter syndrome, how does that link into the shadow self? Now, thriving now, that is an amazing question. Imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome, and it's something that I still struggle with. It's different from imposter syndrome is different from having a healthy level of self-doubt, because with a healthy level of self-doubt, we realize we are not perfect, we're not amazing, we don't know everything, we have a level of humility. Imposter syndrome is different. Imposter syndrome is a difficulty in being able to accept our strengths, our qualities, our achievements. And the curious thing about imposter syndrome is it only seems to affect people who are actually pretty good at what they do. It only seems to affect people who achieve, strive, try. It never seems to affect people that just want to sit on their backside, shake their fist and hate the world. It doesn't seem to affect them at all. So there's something in that. But in our shadow self, maybe over time we have learned, again, not to be arrogant. But we confuse arrogance with confidence. Having a sense of pride in what we do. For example, if you, let me see, you bake cakes, you can make cakes, amazing cakes, delicious cakes. You're pretty good at it. Your cakes are really good. Everybody always enjoys them. But every time you make a cake and people compliment you on it, it's what we do is we dismiss it. It wasn't as good as the last one I made, or it's not as nice as the cake I had the other day. It's the difficulty in being able to accept our achievements, our qualities, our strengths, our skills. And it could be maybe the fear of pride, because I take pride in the fact that I make pretty good cakes. We confuse that with being a prideful person. No, that's not the same thing. There's nothing wrong with having a sense of self-respect, a little bit of pride, dignity, things like that. We're not talking about haughty behavior. But with imposter syndrome, it can feel like any kind of celebration of ourselves on any level. Feels like it's the wrong thing. We can fear that someone's going to take it off us. They're going to kick the chair out from under us. They're going to steal our crown, one way or another. So yes, that can be part of our shadow self. There could be stuff in our shadow self. Again, when we integrate that and we recognize when it comes to making cakes, give other people permission to enjoy your cake, okay? They would be asking you for cake if you were no good at it, and if they enjoy it, so much the better. Feel good because they're feeling good. When we integrate things like that from our shadow self, we can understand where that comes from, why it's there, and again, we have a choice. Okay, blessings for yourself. Thank you. Self-worth is the key. Yeah, having a sense of self-worth. That's all it is. Again, we are not necessarily amazing. We're not necessarily going to change the world. We're not going to save the world. We don't have to be, but we have value. We have skills. We can contribute. We appreciate others, and it's nice to be appreciated. We're worth more than some people maybe lead us to believe we are. Always helping low self-esteem. That's good to know. I'm glad you're finding that helpful about Stoner's Code, the self-esteem, confidence. I'm glad you're finding that helpful. Yeah, avoiding the shame, avoid failure. And I think it's not uncommon that when we do fear failure, depending on our situation, I think there's also the fear of success as well, and that's why we tend to stay stuck. It's like living. It's rather hiding in plain sight. We don't really want to draw attention to ourselves. We don't want to be the top of the class, but we don't want to be at the bottom either. We're just trying to stay hidden in plain sight. From PTSD to post-traumatic growth. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about post-traumatic stress, and it is a very real thing. There is also what's known as post-traumatic growth, and sometimes people that do analytical work, psychoanalytical work, when they learn about their traumas, how they've learned to compartmentalize, split, and all of the other things that we do, as they become integrated, what we see as a growth. People learn a confidence and a resilience maybe they didn't have before. They become more compassionate than perhaps they had been before. They have a bit more energy. Some people, when it comes to the concept of growth, some people use the things that have happened to them as platforms to something else, something greater. The example I could think of would be people who've maybe been in a terrible accident, an airplane or a train or something like that. And they, following that, after doing their own work, after going through therapy and everything else, they campaign tirelessly. No one else is ever going to have to go through what I went through. So it can become, when it comes to growth, it can become a platform to something else. See, where are we going? Psyche is so weak and fractured. And there is something in that when you're imagine peace, when you recognize that it is weak and fractured. And there are different approaches, by the way. The psychoanalytical side, maybe, the Jungian approach, it is looking at integrating those parts of us, the parts of us that are damaged, understanding why they're damaged and what we do with it. There's also things like, when it comes to trauma, trauma-focused CBT. There is CBT, but there's also trauma-focused CBT that works specifically with that. There's Gestalt therapy. There's even just psychodynamic therapy, person-centered. There's so many different approaches. It's never a one-size-fits-all, and sometimes it is about finding the right approach for you. It could even be a combination of finding not just the right approach, but also the right kind of therapist. But one way or another, recognizing you need some kind of help or support is a good place to start. It's looking for that kind of support. We can also get support from things like support groups. We can also get support from reading articles, from watching videos, from trying different kinds of exercises. There's lots of different things we can do. You're new to the shadow self theory. Well, it's been around. It's been around longer than me. But it's something. I paraphrase Carl Jung when I say this. When it comes to things like our shadow self, it's like it's an ongoing thing, because there's, to paraphrase him, just when we think we've got ourselves sorted, there's something new to learn. So it's like an ongoing journey of development. But it is interesting when we do learn things, how and why we react the way we do, where these things came from, why are they still present today? Shadow side is your passion side, not always, but your passion can be in there. A lot of people suppress their passions. Yeah, they might want to be a good artist. They might want to climb Everest. That could be their passion. They would love to do something like that, but it's what is in their shadow side that is maybe holding them back. I had to find myself, avoided everyone like the plague. Yeah, there is, again, it can lead to withdrawal, can lead to avoidance. And these are common behaviors when people have experienced distressing events. When we understand why we're doing it, not just about how we stop doing it. I mean, it's good because there's different therapeutic approaches can help us to stop doing it. When we get a sense of why we avoid, again, that will give us a choice. We can tap into those other areas. Again, where are we confident in one area? Where are we able to assert ourselves? Where are we able to mix? Where are we able to be friendly? Where are we able to be more sociable in certain situations? What's different there that we can apply to this? Going towards the end. Okay. Hello, Barbara. You've come pretty much at the end. No problem. You can watch this from the beginning. So pretty much come to the end tonight. I hope, as I say, I hope you find something helpful just in the concept of the shadow self. There's a lot of information out there. There's our therapists who specifically deal with psychoanalytical work, integration of the shadow. A lot of them may have written articles. Some of them might even have YouTube videos. But if there's, if you want to learn more about it, there's probably a lot of resources out there. If it's something you're interested in, a psychoanalytical therapist is maybe the person to go to learn more about those things, those aspects of ourselves, in order to become a bit more whole, if you will. So, as always, come to the end, and I do appreciate everyone joining me this evening. I hope you found that helpful. As I say, there were questions, just some questions to maybe get you thinking about your own kind of shadow work. Remember, it is a process. We don't always necessarily get to the end straight away. We don't always learn everything about ourselves overnight, which is why, again, we use psychoanalytical. It is too late. I'm keep getting the wrong words. Psychoanalytical therapists. Okay. As always, if you find this helpful, if you find this interesting, do please click the like button thing and leave me a comment or whatever. And I do appreciate you all for joining me. It's going to be another 10 days, so the next time will be on a Sunday. So it's not going to be this Sunday, but the next. And as always, I'm open to suggestions. Now, I was open to suggestions, but I did put the suggestion out if anyone would be interested in learning about the shadow self, and a lot of people seem to be really interested. So again, I will put it out. I will ask if there's anything you would like me to cover, and we will take it from there. As always, thanks for joining me this evening, and until next time, thanks for watching.